Hello, welcome to the Basketball Soapbox here on YouTube, Facebook, the Basketball Soapbox Network, as always. Um, and this one here, I'm going live. Um, Trying this again. I tried it a little while ago, a couple months ago, a little bit. But just trying it here again as the NBA Finals is continuing here. We have the NBA Finals Game 3 that's about to be on Wednesday. And I just wanted to give a little bit of analysis of the series so far. Over the first two games, we didn't think, well, at the start of the series, we did not think that the Miami Heat could make it much of a series, right? Like at most, I was like, they're going to be able to get to one or two games, right? Like in every series that Miami Heat does, right? They're able to get one or two games, scratch and claw to get a game. They're going to find a way. They're going to junk up the game, suppose a good enough coach to try different adjustments, make things work to make it a little bit more gritty, right? So that was the least expectations for the Miami Heat in this series. Looking at it in game one, it did look like that, right? Like the Denver Nuggets were going to roll over the Miami Heat, especially with the way that Nikola Jokic was playing and Jamal Murray were playing with their two-man game. Really dissecting the Miami Heat defense, right? And using their size, right? Like, especially Aaron Gordon in the first game, got off to 12 points in the first quarter, just basically running to the basket, sealing off the Miami Heat, smaller guards in transition, getting seals and scoring, posting up, backing down, and scoring on the inside. So that was the first thing that was noticeable so far in this series, right? The size of the Denver Nuggets compared to the Miami Heat. Bam Adebayo being the biggest guy at 6'9", trying to guard Nikola Jokic, trying to stop all these backdoor cuts, protect the rim, rebound, do all these little things that is needed, especially against a team like Denver, right? Especially with Nikola Jokic, we're operating out of the high post where he has the ability to be a triple threat type scorer, right? He's able to post up, he's able to shoot the mid range, he's able to shoot the three, dribble handoffs with Jamal Murray, pick and rolls, things of that nature that Nikola Jokic can just do. And over the course of that first game, it was just like Miami's only shot, right, was to hit 3-pointers, right, to at least try to replicate what they have been doing over the postseason, right? They were 27th, I believe, in the regular season from shooting the three ball. In the playoffs, they were number one. So going into that game, you thought that was going to be a point of emphasis of that. And when you see Max Strus start off the way he did, shooting the ball terribly, that's not going to help, right? Like that's not going to uh, open up the defense for Jimmy Butler, open up the defense for Bam Adebayo. And Miami basically said, all right, we're going to take your weak point of your offense, Bam Adebayo, and force him to score, right? And of course, Bam had 25 points on 26 shots. 26 on 25 shots. But the point is that he's not the vocal point of your offense, right? You want these other guys like a Gabe Vincent who played well in both games, I'll talk about, who played well in both games to shoot the basketball. You don't want these other guys like Max Strus, Duncan Robinson, Caleb Martin to get off. And that's basically what it was the Denver Nuggets just looking at those guys and saying, hey, you're not going to be able to shoot the ball. We're going to let you get every shot you want in the first game, and that's what happened in the first game. We're going to let you get all these open shots, and the Miami Heat were just not converting on them. I think they were 4 for 18 on open shots in the first game, and you just didn't think Miami could score with this team, right? But Miami, surprisingly, in the first game, which kind of gave them a little hope, and which I was thinking of, was that the fact that they held them to 103 points, despite the missing from 3-point shots, despite the inconsistencies on offense, despite the hesitance of Jimmy Butler in the first game. The bright spot was Bam Adebayo scoring. The second bright spot was the defense of the Miami Heat. And that carried over to game two, where I thought people are really talking about the third quarter. Of course, the fourth quarter by Duncan Robinson coming in and scoring 10 straight points, which was wild, even getting to the basket and getting an and one in that retrospect. But ultimately, I didn't think that was the breaking point in the series for the Miami Heat. I thought in the second quarter, I think the Nuggets were up 50-36, and that's a 14, 15-point lead for the Denver Nuggets about to head into halftime. The way the Miami Heat just battled back, I think even Cody Zeller scored a bucket. The ability that they just had to grind it down and get it to 6 points before halftime, I thought that was the turning point in game 2 for the Miami Heat. Because at that point in time, with the way the Nuggets were playing, yeah, guys weren't hitting shots for them, but Joker was involved. Bruce Brown was involved. All these other guys were involved. And over the course of that, it's just like, okay, you get a 15-point lead going into the halftime. If you're the Denver Nuggets, that game is over. And the Miami Heat found a way to claw themselves back into the game and get it to, why is this not posted? And get it to the 6-point part, right? Like they were able to cut it down to 6-point lead for the Denver Nuggets. And that part right there just showed the fight of the Miami Heat. And I was just like, okay, it's going to be a game here. The game is not over yet. Because if you have a 15-point lead going into halftime, it's pretty difficult. And especially the way the Joker came out in the third quarter, scoring 18, I believe, in the third quarter, and basically just abusing Cody Zeller. I said he looked like the dude from Celtic Pride. He was getting worn out to the point where it was getting him confused on the offensive end where he bobbled the ball a couple of times, right? But just over the course of that and Bam Adebayo's play, I can't speak enough about Bam, the way he has been playing in this series. Really putting it together here. 23.5 points per game. He had 21 in this game, 53% from the field, 11 rebounds and 4.5 assists over the course of the series. He's scoring enough for the Miami Heat where Jimmy Butler's trying to find his game to keep them in it, right? Gabe Vincent's knocking down shots. Max Strus, of course, coming out in game 2 having a tremendously better shooting performance than he did in game 1, right? Like those were the factors for the Miami Heat. I believe they only had 11 3-pointers in the first game and shot 33%. In the second game, they had 17 three-point shots and shot 48% from 3. That's the recipe for the Miami Heat, where you don't think they're able to keep up with Nikola Jokic. They're not able to keep up with Jamal Murray. The ability to knock down shots keeps them in the game. And that's the difference. I think the Denver Nuggets only made 11 threes in the game. It was a horrible shooting performance from the Denver Nuggets, especially from KCP and Michael Porter Jr., who just couldn't get it going on the night. Jamal Murray was kind of ineffective. But let's talk about the Miami Heat defense in that. The Miami Heat defense, the ability to go to zone, kind of stagnates things, kind of throws people off, and especially with Nikola Jokic, who's able to play in that middle realm and get to the basket, able to score like that. You figure that would be the calling card for them, right? Like that would be the answer to the zone, and it has been working. Force Nikola Jokic to be a scorer. That's what people have been saying, to force him to be a scorer. I believe Tim Bontemps was talking to Mark Jackson after game 1, and Mark Jackson instantly said, make him a scorer. And I've said this about many superstars before. Let them get all they want and take out the other guys. And that's essentially what the Miami Heat did in game 2. The ineffectiveness of Jamal Murray, slowing him down. Aaron Gordon was solid, had 12 points, I believe. But the effectiveness of taking out Michael Porter Jr., taking out a KCP out of the realm where they can have those 3-point shooters, guys that can score, taking away their jumpers, taking away their shots, and turning it around and slowing down, basically making Joker do everything, right? And he can get anything he wants this series. He's averaging 34 points, 10 rebounds, and 9 assists on 60, 42, 85 splits from the field. So you're sitting there looking and you're like, they're forcing Joker to score. They're forcing him to play a way that's not naturally rubbing off on his teammates, because that's what Joker does, right? He's able to run that 2-man game with Jamal Murray, able to hit guys on cutters and backdoor cuts. And the Miami Heat said, nope, we're going to simplify everything. We're going to make the Joker work. We're going to double him at certain points, blitz him. We're going to force these other guys, not let them beat us. And that's what the Miami Heat did, where they got the 111-108 victory. And Miami just came out hot in the fourth quarter. They hung around enough, and Duncan Robinson knocked down enough shots there to give them a chance early on in that game. And that was the difference. 1 second here. And that was the difference for them, right? So you're sitting there looking at it from that perspective where the Miami Heat are enough to junk up the game, right? Get it, kind of funnel everything to the Joker, right? Not let these other guys collectively get off. Whereas the Miami Heat, I believe Jimmy Butler and Bam both had 21, Gabe Vincent had 23. The ability to get multiple scores like that, the adjustments by Spo starting Kevin Love. Kevin Love by no means is a defender. He's not going to stop anybody. He's not going to do that, right? Like, he's not going to do that. But the way that he was able to put a body on Aaron Gordon, slow him down effectively enough to say, you're not just going to back us down. You're not just going to get in the way, and take that advantage that you had in game one. We're not going to do that. We're not going to let you get off to a hot start like that. We're not going to do that. The second thing that he did was putting Jimmy Butler on Jamal Murray, putting a bigger, stronger guard on him, forcing him to kind of be out of the game, take him out the game. Basically, those dribble handoffs are not going to be as easy as you thought it was going to be. It's not going to happen. And we saw that on the last play of the game, right, where they actually switched to Jamal Murray on Jimmy Butler. And when they did that, I thought, first of all, Jimmy Butler's strong enough to kind of make Jamal Murray kind of pick up his dribble a little bit. And we saw that when Jimmy Butler reached in and almost got a steal. Right? So, and Jamal Murray got a look at the ball, but it was a more difficult shot than anticipated. People are saying he should have called the timeout, various things of that nature. But those two things, just matching strength with Kevin Love on Aaron Gordon, just to be a big body, Jimmy Butler on Jamal Murray, it took the Denver Nuggets out of their offense. More than making Joker a score, right? We're going to take away these other guys. And Joker, if you score 50 and beat us, we'll shake your hand. And that's the thing that I think a lot of places should do, right? Like that should be the focus. Like, especially with a superstar player with Joker, who really thrives on getting other guys involved, other guys not creating their own shots, and things of that nature. When you funnel everything to him and say, hey, you're going to have to score tonight, big fella. And Joker is capable of doing that. They almost got away with it. But that takes the rest of the Denver Nuggets out of the game. That takes Jeff Green out. That takes Bruce Brown out. That takes Jamal Murray out. And late in game situations when you need to make a run and make scores and stuff like that, and you take those guys who haven't touched the ball in a while, it affects what they're able to do. And that's what the Miami Heat were able to do against the Denver Nuggets in game two. And I'm not making this anything more than what it needs to be. Of course, Denver Nuggets missed some type of defensive assignments, let guys get a couple open shots. And the Miami Heat, credit to them, were able to knock down their shots. But the Denver Nuggets right there have fell into a little bit of a lull, right? They won game one. Miami Heat won game two. They won a road game, the first loss for the Denver Nuggets this whole postseason. So that shows that Miami, hey, we're comfortable enough to go in there and get a win. Regardless of what happens in Miami, at least if we can get a split there and get it back to Denver, we at least know we can at least get a game there. And I think that's very important for the standpoint of the Miami Heat, especially building confidence going forward, getting a couple guys more acclimated to shooting, getting them more comfortable shooting the ball. Bam Adebayo has been awesome for this series, but it's going to be interesting looking ahead to game three, where I think more of that should continue. I think the shooting for Miami will be a little bit better. I think Joker's going to try to do that thing where he did in the first game, where it's like, I'm going to actually make sure I pass the ball, get other guys involved early, things of that nature to help alleviate the pain that was felt in game two. What do we have here? But continuing, just seeing that the Miami Heat were able to go in there, junk up the game enough, do certain things to make it more difficult for the Denver Nuggets, gives Miami a chance, right? Like, that's the one thing that we thought about going in this series. How does Miami figure out a way to their Joker problem, the dribble, the two-man game between him and Jamal Murray? These other guys shooting the ball. How are we going to be able to score with these guys? And the answer was defense. And the answer was knocking down a couple of more shots than they were in game one. And if Miami's able to do that now going back to South Beach, Denver has to figure it out. And of course, we think Denver is the more talented team. They are the more talented team. They have a little bit more depth, I think. But Miami's will, right? That's the one thing that they have also showed to me in this game, in this series, is that they're not going to quit. They're not going to lay down. They're going to find ways to give themselves a chance, really like knock on the door and give themselves a chance. And I think that's the one thing about Miami. I think Miami can win game 3. I think they're going to be a little bit more mojo. They're back at home. Guys are more comfortable shooting at home. The Max Strus, the Caleb Martins, the Gabe Vincent, who have already been. Gabe Vincent has already been playing well this series. Has obviously boosted up whatever contract he's going to be getting in the offseason. But in terms of the other guys, Max Strus, Duncan Robinson, Caleb Martin, Kevin Love, maybe he can even knock down a shot this series. Kyle Lowry, role players play good at home. And the way Bam and Jimmy Butler have been playing, and Jimmy Butler has been off a little bit in this series, he came on late in the fourth quarter, scoring 8 in the fourth quarter in game 2, and knocking down a big 3 in the corner, and then was able to get an and one. So with that effectiveness, the Miami Heat defense, I expect them to win game 3. I'm going to give them the chance in game 3 to take the edge 2-1. Not saying they're going to win the series, but I think that momentum, guys being back at home, Miami Heat still going to use the zone, junk up things. They found something with Jimmy Butler on Jamal Murray. They found something putting Kevin Love into the game, putting a bigger body in the game, so Aaron Gordon just doesn't have free run to the basket and offensive rebounds and things of that nature. I think Miami wins game 3. Moving on to the Q&A section. Let me type that in. Now, this is going to be the questions and answers that I put on social. That I wanted to get a couple of questions from socials. People are just thinking about basketball. I just said NBA topics, and people threw some things out there that I'm going to answer. Of course, if I get any comments here in the chat box, I will also answer those as well. So give me one moment. Let me pull up my questions here. Manuel from Sit and Talk. Is Brad going to match offers for Grant Williams? There's been reportedly that Orlando Magic are interested in signing Grant Williams, which I would expect would be a team that would look at him. It depends on the money, right? Because, of course, you're going to have this Jaylen Brown extension at some point over the offseason or into early next season. Are you going to – when is that going to happen? You kind of have to plan and figure out what you're doing with the rest of the roster. I think if it's anything over $12, $13 million a year – that they're probably not going to match, probably look to do a sign and trade at some point if that's possible, throwing Payton Pritchard. It depends on the threshold here. Anything over $12 million, I don't think they're going to try to match it. I think they figured out, especially with the benching of Grant Williams, which was I questioned as well, was that going to be a smart move? I do not think so. So looking at that, it depends on the threshold there. If it's at $12 million, I do not think so. Moving on, Lester from Sit and Talk also, is the new CBA good for the league? I believe he said Supermax as well, especially with the Jaylen Brown question and stuff like that. So after further review, I believe the luxury tax is $5 million or something to that nature, and then it goes the second apron where there's a cap on what teams can do in terms of expanding the roster. I think it's at $17.5 million for every dollar that they're over or something like that, or every threshold that they hit. What that does when they hit the second apron is that, one, you don't have the mid-level exception to sign free agents, right? You don't have that mid-level exception. Guys are going to have to take the minimum in that situation, which I think will deter a lot of guys from going to those teams, especially if the bread is not right. Depends on where they are in their career, as well as they're not able to trade first-round picks. I don't think you can go 5 years into the future or some crap like that. Like we've seen the Paul George trade do. We've seen the Rockets do. We've seen the Miami Heat do. Various teams, the Dallas Mavericks, of course, trading multiple picks if they're over that threshold. They're not able to trade there. And they're going to only be able to offer the minimum. It limits what teams who are overspending do. Now, with that being said, I believe the new NBA TV deal comes in 2024, 2025. So that's a year away. And I think it's 25, 20, yeah, 24, 25 season. So I think in the short term, it can make some teams scramble, right? So I think that there's going to be, I think the days of those guys, remember, of course, with the last one that happened with the cap hitting up, where guys like Evan Turner, Alfredo Camino, guys of that nature, those mid card guys getting those high max salaries that we saw Otto Porter Jr. potentially getting $20 million a year. Those days are probably over where guys are getting money just because of the money there. Now, do I think that teams are going to try to figure out a way to maybe sign a guy a little bit for more to maybe potentially set up a sign and trade potentially so things can work? Yes, that's going to happen. But in terms of the long term, it kind of reminded me of the first lockout in '99 for the NBA, right? Where guys like Stephon Marbury was like, yo, I got to get out of here because with this new cap, I can't get paid like Kevin Garnett. And that's where he went out and got traded to New Jersey, I believe, or New Jersey, right? So you're sitting there looking at it that way, where you're like, okay, guys are going to be moving. This Jaylen Brown situation for the Celtics could be a problem that could be there lingering. But I think with the new NBA TV deal that's lingering in 2 years, I think that's going to impact the CBA more than anything else and get it back to where we are right now before previously, where it's not going to be like people are worried about the CBA now being basically, oh, you're going to have two guys that you can go to or one guy and a bunch of role players, a bunch of good guys and a bunch of starters. And that's going to create balance throughout the league. Potentially, yes, that can do it for 1 or 2 seasons, but long term, I think with the NBA TV deal, those tax thresholds are going to go up. Those the salary cap is definitely going to go up without as much money as Adam Silver is saying is going through streaming. Watching the game, just look at the playoffs. If you look at the reports, people are watching the NBA. So I don't think the money is only going to get bigger. So as for a year or two, maybe the salary cap is going to the CBA. The salary cap is going to affect certain teams, especially those higher paying teams like the Celtics, like the Warriors, like the Clippers, and various other teams that is going to affect, right? And there's all those potentials with, I think, the rookie deals are not going to be max in 5 years. I think it's only going to be a 4-year max with a 5-year option, but it doesn't have to be the max. I think that's going to basically another thing that saves the owner from themselves, right? We look at the Zion situation right now, and seeing things of that nature, and it's like, okay, what is happening here in terms these teams that are signing guys to all these deals and it's not paying out. So I think that's a little thing that's trying to save owners from themselves. But I think with the CBA going up, I think with the CBA coming in, the new TV deal potentially coming in, that it will get better. I think it will. Moving on here, Cal Jr. asked, who did the Knicks move to improve their roster, Barrett or Randall? And obviously to me, it's going to be Barrett because I think Julius Randle has shown that he is a capable scorer. He's a capable rebounder. He can pass the ball and facilitate. But you can see his play style for a place where you think New York is, where you think there's a lot of, calling for his play style. Efficient scoring inside and shooting the balls when he's not doing those things. And especially I think RJ Barrett is the better potential upside, even if a young team is willing to take a swing on him. Julius Randle recently just had ankle surgery, so he already had that foot injury that was happening. He has that ankle injury happening on. It's going to be difficult for those guys to turn around and then turn around and do that. I just don't think that's going to be a feasible option for the New York Knicks as they thought it was on that end, where they thought they were going to get as much as they want for hold on one second. Get as much as they thought they would for Julius Randle. I just don't think that's on the table anymore like they thought it would be. Yeah, that's just not going to happen. So moving on from that, Going on to Courtney Sanders here. He says, how will the Grizzlies survive without Ja? And one of the better teams in the league that have been built to do that over the past couple of years have been the Memphis Grizzlies. I think they're going to be okay without Ja for a little bit, depending on the suspension and how long that is. Recently, his camp is saying that it was a toy gun. I don't know how that's going to go over, but the Memphis Grizzlies have been able to survive without Ja Morant for the most part, right? Like, they've been able to go on stretches without him and survive. They have been able to do that. I think the emergence of Jaren Jackson Jr. over that point in time, over last year, he's really coming to his own. If he can just stay on the floor and not foul, they can still have Desmond Bane. They have various guys, Brandon Clark coming back, Steven Adams, Xavier Tillman, guys of that nature, Tyrus Jones, all these guys that play for them, they are going to come together and figure it out. And I think their coach is good enough to figure it out. Moving on, Courtney Sanders again. Everyone talking about breaking up the Jays. Why isn't anybody talking about breaking up Paul George and Kawhi Leonard? And I think everybody comes into the agreement if those guys are healthy, and it's just the way that we've seen it, right? Like, if Kawhi and Paul George are healthy, your team is going to win. I think they're over 500 when they play together, even though it's not as many games. They win basketball games. They are effective. And especially the allure of Kawhi Leonard, one, winning a championship with the Spurs, two, winning a championship with Toronto, being that guy going forward. We have seen Kawhi Leonard do that. And the allure of Kawhi Leonard when he plays, we even seen it in the playoffs, when he plays, everything looks great. Paul George, same thing. When he plays, everything looks great. Unfortunately, in the playoffs, we have just not been able to see those guys together and playing well, right? But when we look at everyone saying break up the Jays, multiple Eastern Conference Finals appearance and a Finals appearance last year, Eastern Conference Finals appearance this year, people are saying they're not working, they're not sticking together, whatever the case may be, despite the winning record, despite everything that they're doing. So it is puzzling to see why people are saying break up the Jays and no one's saying anything about Kawhi Leonard and Paul George. Stephen A. Smith is the only person I've heard come out and say Kawhi Leonard needs to retire. He said he needs to retire. That's the only person I saw really go at Kawhi Leonard and say, yo, this guy's not available. He needs to retire, whatever the case may be. But he's the only guy that I've seen criticize Kawhi Leonard openly like that to that point. Looking at it from the standpoint of them breaking up, the Clippers really don't have really much options, especially in the Paul George trade. To do anything but a sign and trade. Maybe you can get a team to possibly convince themselves of Kawhi Leonard. All that injury-prone stuff is very difficult from that standpoint. Looking at Paul George and where his situation is, same thing. Injury-prone is going to be hard to trade those guys, so they're kind of stuck with him at least for the short term until they figure out what they need to do. But, yep, something needs to happen with the LA Clippers. Moving on, Jamal said the Portland situation. I believe that's the Dame Lillard situation, especially if he wants to get traded or not. And I already made a video about that where I think it's time for them to trade him. I think they need to trade him, move on from him, have that third round pick, draft Brandon Miller or Scoot Henderson, whoever's available, and rebuild. You still have Shaedon Sharpe. You still have Anthony Simons. Move the rest of the guys off the roster. They still have capable guys like Jeremy Grant and Yusuf Nurkic, guys that can have some type of value to bring back more assets, bring back contracts, bring back younger guys. Dame situation, looked around the league outside of New York. You don't want to. New York already has Jalen Brunson. You can't put them together. Philadelphia is an option, depending on what's there. If James Harden is still there, if they can figure out a way to trade Dame Lillard to Philly, that would be awesome. Also, Miami, I don't think anybody would want Tyler Hero, unfortunately, in what they have, especially if I'm Portland. I'm looking to get assets back. Also, looking at a spot I thought would be a good spot, especially where Portland can get back young assets and maybe a draft pick. A couple draft picks is Orlando. I think Jonathan Isaacs can be traded. I think Jalen Suggs, depending on who you draft, could be a nice addition there. But you have Jonathan Isaac who can be a front man up front and figure out something there and figure out what bigs can we get from Orlando. But does Dame want to go to Orlando? Probably not. Dame has been 10 toes down in Portland, not ready to leave. he's going to stay there. I don't see him leaving there. But I do think it's time for them to trade him. I do think, as well as the situation with the owner, where I believe Paul Allen's sister or whatever it is, his sister is refusing to sell to Paul Knight, who was in heads with Nike. He's one of the founders of Nike and stuff like that. I think that's disappointing because I think there's a guy that wants to own the Portland Trailblazers. That's one. Two, he's from the area, Portland, Oregon, Nike's headquarters. Why wouldn't you do that? And is that a situation where they want to trade? He comes in and he trades Dame? So what? I think it's time for them to trade Dame. I think it's time for them to sell the team. If they're not going to try to build around Damian Lillard, which they have not done in his 11-year career. They've had moments, but they have failed to continuously build around Damian Lillard, and I cannot sit there and continue to watch that. Like, they need to rebuild, and especially the potential that you can possibly have with Scoot Henderson and Shaedon Sharpe. That is a highlight factory, at least. You know, you got two guys that are going to show up to work. If it's a Brandon Miller, you have a wing combo where the league is built on wings. You look around the league, Jimmy Butler, Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown, Anthony Edwards, all these guys variously around the league. You can sit there and trade Damian Lillard and start a rebuild. You don't have to continue to sit there. And as I said on my Portland Trailblazers video, it doesn't have to be a situation where it's a Jerry Jones, Terrell Owens situation. It doesn't have to be he takes a tablecloth out, circles a white circle and crosses it down and says, this is where we part ways. It doesn't have to be like that. Like, this should be easy for everybody and understand, hey, we tried it. We tried it for a good, 10 years, a decade, and it didn't work. And that's fine. And it's time to move on from that situation. I believe Dame needs to get out of there. He's too much of a talent in Portland, and especially in that small market where he can't bring anybody. In 10 years, you haven't gotten anybody. And that's the facts of it. Like, when LeBron was in Cleveland for those 10 years when he wasn't winning, nobody came. Right? He had 37-year-old Shaq. Other guys were not coming to Cleveland. So Damian Lillard, who's in Portland, who's on the West Coast, it's not LA, even though it's close to there, close to Vancouver, close to Vegas, close to Texas. It's like you at least have that there. But unfortunately for them, he can't do it. He can't do it in Portland. I just don't think so. CJ left. That was the breakdown of it all. And I'm just like, yo, it's time. And that's okay. The Portland situation, they need to sell the team. They need to trade Dame and start a rebuild. Moving on to main topic, he had a bunch of questions there, which I'm going to answer. This was written, of course, yesterday. Is Miami better than people think? Of course they are. It's heat culture. Like, that's the one thing that we've seen with Miami, that the ability to just continuously reinvent themselves. They were not a three-point shooting team. All of a sudden, they're shooting three-pointers. They are not they're eighth seed who people were saying we're going to get out of the first round, out in the second round, out in the third round, and they are still here. They're like a cockroach that won't die, right? Like, even when you turn the lights on, they don't run away. They're still there. They're thug cockroaches. They're thug cockroaches. That's how I describe the Miami Heat. They do not go away. They stay around. They just constantly, continuously a thorn in the side. And especially as a Celtics fan, they've been a thorn in the Celtics side for the past couple of years. They're not going away. They're going to find a way to reinvent themselves. And especially if they do get Damian Lillard or any potential star to go there and play with Jimmy Butler, it's going to get interesting for them. Moving on, is Nikola Jokic the best player in the league? For the past couple of years, I've been saying Giannis. I'm still going to lean Giannis. Basically because Giannis's impact on both sides of the floor. I think the level of Joker offensively, I think he's tops in the league. The ability to get it done on three different levels: the post, the mid-range, and the three-point shot. I think that his ability to score from all three levels, facilitate the way he does, rebound, and is a better defender. People are going to say he's not a great defender, but he has gotten better in that regard for what's needed in the NBA as a big man to at least battle. I think we got to start leaning towards him, right? Like Kevin Durant's injury prone. We see what happened with him when he can get inefficient. LeBron James is far from that for the past couple of years. He's not that level of player anymore. Anthony Davis flirts with it when he wants to, when he's healthy and can actually go. Joel Embiid, who won MVP, is obviously in the conversation. I think he's dominant enough on both sides of the ball. But right now, especially with this playoff run, it's got to be Joker, right? Like, Giannis is not that guy the past 2 years, right? He's not Against Boston last year, we've seen him struggle. Against coming back in this series against Miami, we've seen him actually be dominant, but not get the job done. Nikola Jokic right now has the wins. He has the stats, and he's moving on, right? Like he's in the finals, right? So we got to kind of give the edge to him. Moving on is Spoelstra, Eric Spoelstra, the best in the league. Now, forever, I'm going to say Pop. Greg Popovich in San Antonio. You give him some guys that can actually go. He has a couple of guys there down in San Antonio, Keldon Johnson, Devin Vessel, guys of that nature. He has something there, but not enough to win games. They're obviously tanking. Obviously have the first round draft pick in this year's draft. But looking at, and I'll get to the live chat, the live comments in a minute there. But in terms of what Eric Spoelstra has been able to do, and people have said, oh, he's a big three guy. He was able to succeed with those guys and win championships with those guys, and that's the reason why he's successful. And I never believed that, because even before LeBron James and Chris Bosh came to Miami, Eric Spoelstra was getting enough out of those guys. The second year when he was the coach, I believe the first year he was 44, 39 and lost to the Celtics. And then Dwayne Wade got hurt the next year and they won 17 games. So when you're looking at it from that standpoint of what Eric Spoelstra has been able to do, reinvent himself multiple times, being able to get to the playoffs, been able to get the most out of all these guys. Hassan Whiteside was a coveted guy in the league. James Johnson, another guy that was a highly touted guy in the league that people were going after. You look at guys like Caleb Martin, Duncan Robinson, Tyler Hero. This guy Highsmith that came out of nowhere and scored 18 in game one. The ability to get even Justice Winslow, the ability to get guys the maximum out of these guys, put them in the right positions on both sides, keep everyone involved, right? Like from the top to the bottom of their roster, he's utilizing them, getting them into the right spots, getting them into the right spaces to be successful on both ends of the floor. Even if they're not good defenders, he's like, yo, we're not going to put you in the area where you're alone. We're going to battle with you offensively. We're going to run plays for you. You're not just going to be out there and just be a decoy. We're actually going to run stuff for you and have you be effective. Eric Spoelstra is up there. Yeah, I think he's number 2, of course, behind Pop. But if anyone says he's number 1, I can't argue it. He's an 8th seed in the NBA Finals. It has been effectively out-coaching everyone for a couple of years now. It has been doing it with less talented team. No superstars, especially when people talk about Jimmy Butler or anything like that. And I can't speak enough about him. He's been awesome. Moving on to the next question, where does Jimmy Butler rank amongst the best players? Now, if this is all time, I have a running joke. If Jimmy Butler wins the NBA Finals, he's the 3rd greatest player on my list all time. And I'm going to argue anybody with it, and I don't care. You can get upset. I don't care. But in the league, Jimmy Butler is a top, during the regular season, top 15 NBA player. During the postseason, he becomes a top 5 player. And we don't know why, especially this postseason where he dismantled the Bucks, he dismantled the Knicks, he dismantled the Celtics. Like, I'm a Jimmy Butler fan. I respect Jimmy Butler and what he's been able to do. In the postseason, he's a top 5 player. In the regular season, I think he's a top 15 player. I got him better than Harden, despite what everybody says about Harden, his ability to score 45 and be a dual threat. Jimmy Butler just raises his game and has had more successes than James Harden. I would say top 15. Top 15 in the postseason, potentially top 5 player. That's just what it is. Charles Jones Jr., Wordsmith Jones, shout out. He said best NBA duels, and I want to save this for a discussion pod that hopefully I can have multiple people on, because there was a lot of duels out there. He mentioned Bird and Neek in 87, Game 7, of course, one of the best duels in NBA history. People forget Bird had such a second-half surge that people forget that Dominique Wilkins had 47 on the road and lost by 2 points in that one. I think I talked about Melo and Kobe in Game 1 in 2009 in the Western Conference Finals. I believe Dirk and there's so many games there. Dirk had a couple 50-point games against the Spurs and against the Kings and stuff like that. LeBron James and Carmelo Anthony. I believe there's a regular season game when Carmelo Anthony was in Denver Carmelo hit the game-winning shot. There's so many duels there that need to be talked about that I think it's for a bigger conversation. Continuing here, Al Howard came in. I don't believe that these were suggestions or topics, so I don't even know if these are rule changes actually happening in the league, but I think they're being discussed. Retain timeouts after a challenge. I totally agree with that. That should be it. Goaltending, the European rule where it hits any point of the basket, actually retain. You can actually grab it or tip it up. Yes, that should be it. Maybe that would change the rebounding numbers or whatever the case may be. But as soon as it hits the rim, you should be able to grab it and knock it off. Do whatever you need to do to stop the bucket. And I think that'll be interesting to change a lot of things in the NBA, especially with scoring. But I think that's a rule that needs to happen. I've seen it in the playoffs where guys are even tipping the ball to each other anyway. So if they're able to get it off the glass as soon as it touches and touch it without it being in the rim of the circle or whatever that bullshit is, I'm fine with that. I'm totally fine with that. Move the 3-point line out further. I'm not necessarily with that. Because then you have a Mike Bibby situation, and then people are just taking long twos. That's my feel on that. I feel like guys are still shooting the ball enough. I feel like it's okay. I don't think you need to make it a trick shot contest, which everybody's afraid of, to eliminate the three and make guys take more mid-range shots. I'm not with that. Take the three. Leave it where it is. Carry the ball. The next one, carry the ball. Go back to a legitimate 2 steps. Legitimate 2 steps, I think, is gone from the NBA, where guys are so crafty with the ball, willing to try things. The society that we live in with streaming, people practicing moves. I don't think you're ever going to get back to that 2-step type of game again. I don't think you're going to get there, even though I think you should do it. That's how we play pickup. A lot of people play pickup. I don't know if we're going to get there because just the creativity, the entertainment factor of it. Now, this whole thing with the gather step and then taking 3 steps after that and then dribbling, I'm not with that. So that gather step that they have created over the past couple of years with this, you gather yourself and you're able to take another step and then go and then dribble, I'm not with that. I'm against that. No. We need to get that out the game. Carrying the ball has evolved because as long as you're not literally picking up the ball like this, if you're keeping it here, that's fine. Doing that as long as you're not picking the ball up to do something like that, that's not where I'm at. Of course, people are doing that in the league. I think that needs to be tightened up. But in terms of carrying, I just don't think. I just take out that gather step. That's my main thing about that. Just take out that gather step. Moving on to Aaron Carter, who thought the in-season tournament was a good idea. Adam Silver in the league in a way to market it, make more money during the regular season. And of course, I sat there and I said, of course, the stars like LeBron, older guys like Chris Paul, Devin Booker, Kevin Durant, guys of that nature, guys who are superstars, don't really need the in-season tournament, right? Like, I feel like this should be a way for teams, depending on what it is. I don't necessarily know what time frame it is, but I do think there's a $500,000 towards each player if they win. That helps out mainly the second half of your roster, guys who aren't getting paid. Maybe you could call a guy up for like a couple of weeks or whatever the case would be. But those games still count towards the regular season. So that's the part of it where it's like, okay, those games still count towards the regular season. How does that help, stars want to play in that? It's definitely an extra layer of emphasis, right, on the season, right? That's what they're trying to create, right, and create some type of buzz. Now, will it get competitive? I believe so, because we've even seen the play-in tournament get competitive and have good games. Now, the in-season tournament, I think that's a little different. I know soccer does it. I believe college basketball does it. All these other teams do it. So there's finding ways to make it a little bit more fan-friendly, get a little bit more involvement from everybody and get it from that standpoint. And I'm not with it because it's just going to be a regular season game anyway. But for those guys who are bench players, guys that you can call from the G League, guys who are trying to make a roster, that can be a way to make a name for themselves, maybe get other looks from other teams around the league. there's other intriguing things for the in-season tournament that help those type of players, fringe guys, end of the role player guys, to make some money if they win, and two, make a name for themselves. There's an in-season tournament. There's somebody they are going to crown somebody, give them somebody a championship, a trophy inside in-season tournament trophy. There is something going to be there. Those stats are going to count. So I'm not against that. I don't know what happens if a team loses and then who they face or whatever it is, or maybe they face whoever lost in another round or whatever the case may be. But I do think there's good things about it where it helps guys who are the second half of the roster, not starters, not making millions and millions and millions of dollars. It helps those guys out. For the stars and guys who want to, us who are fans, watch it. I don't know how it's going to see, but it's going to be basketball. It's going to be on TV, and I'm going to watch. So we'll see how it turns out. The second question, did racism cause Nikola Jokic a third MVP? I'm going to say no, but I do understand what people are saying. Because once Perkins came out and basically said that NBA voters are voting because he's white, and that's the only reason why they're voting for him, they're ignoring Joel Embiid, Giannis Antetokounmpo, guys of that nature. And I just felt like at that point we were going in a different direction where it wasn't about basketball, where the MVP should be about what's on the floor, what's on the court, and what you value on the floor. Those are the first things. Now, in terms of Joker's play down the stretch kind of maybe turned him off. I've heard people say that, reports say that, and people say he was not too happy with that whole transgression, and that kind of led to the Nuggets' struggles down the stretch. Joel Embiid did play, I believe, more games. I believe he did have more wins. So, I mean, I'm going to go with that, but obviously the Nuggets struggles down the stretch, and the Philadelphia Sixers rise, even though there was a third seed. They did rise up. They did play better than the Denver Nuggets, where Nikola Jokic was kind of leading that charge before. And towards the end of the season, it kind of dragged down a little bit. So racism, no, did not cost them, but maybe in a way it did. But I want to say no because Joel Embiid basically played better majority of the season. That's what I'm going to go with on that one. Jonathan Resende in the comments on Facebook says Miami was the number one team last year. Injuries killed them, but it's the same team. Yes, they are the same team, but in retrospect, they're still an 8 seed, right? Like they were, I think 3 minutes. I think they were down to Chicago 90-86 with 3 minutes to go. Their season was on the line, and they were about to lose to a play-in team. They were 8th seed. They lost to Atlanta in the first game. They came around, and They battled Chicago, won that game. They went on the road in Milwaukee and won that series. They went on the road in New York and won that series. Despite what everybody's saying, they didn't have home court advantage. Tyler Herro's been out. They figured out a way to get there. They figured out a way to get to that point of the 8th seed there. Moving forward here, let's see if there's anything else before I go. Let's see if there's any questions here from here. Oh, come on. Let's see if there's any live questions here. Doesn't look like it. But no, I will continue to do this over the course of the summer. Of course, with the NBA offseason coming up, I believe there will be more questions, but that was good to get that type of feedback from people getting questions and stuff like that in. Much appreciated. That will do it for this episode of the Basketball Soapbox, of course. My second time going live. Very fun to do that. But ultimately, going to continue to do this, ask more questions. Ring Takes, my wrestling podcast, which you guys can check out in the playlist on my YouTube channel. Will potentially be returning tomorrow. We got Brian out of town, so we'll see how that can circle around. A lot of stuff that's happening in wrestling in the world. The NBA Finals is continuing. We're going to continue to talk about that as well. And follow it with more basketball. I have my Portland Trailblazers. They should trade Damian Lillard video up, as well as what the Celtics should do next. The Ja Morant suspension looming, as well as NBA coaches hiring. Check those videos. I've been getting a lot of feedback on those, getting some views. So thank you again for that. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and always join me. That will do it for episode 51, NBA Finals preview of Game 3 and questions and answers. Thank you. And then until next time.